equipment not working. Oh, they got belt filter presses, luckily. Yeah.
What about dewatering?
Dewatering, yeah. So dewatability is another one. So, you know, we focus a lot on this. Like, this is the easy one to think about, having all this struvite and the detrimental impacts of that precipitate being in the digestion stream, clogging, filling up tanks, you know, managing that. You know, maybe we don't like bedazzled sludge, right? And so that's what we focus on. But the other big impact is on the actual dewaterability, right? So what's the percent cake at Cruise right now? 22%. Yeah, Crystal, what do you think about 22% cake? How do you feel about that? That's fine for you guys. I wanted you to like jab them a little bit. There's reasons that it's a slow. What had it been like before? Like go in the Wayback Machine before digestion. What was the percent solids up? Yeah, right. So it's come down a lot. And you're still, and that is that 22% number after you add lime, or is that before lime? After. Yeah. So without the lime, you'd be. I don't think you'd be at 20. Anybody else?
Yeah. It was coming off the belt. You know, we did. Oh, no.
What?
The aerobic sludge was up on the belt.
Yeah, and it's not just the anaerobic, it's the BioP. So let's talk about dewaterability of BioP sludge. So this is Kiel, Wisconsin. And I've got a lot of like Wisconsin case studies. And the reason that I have them is because Wisconsin has one of the largest densities of BioP plants in the country, and also anaerobic digesters. So this is like a 1.5 MGD plant. They have anaerobic digesters. Like, it's just how we do things up north. So this is their biosolids back when they didn't have any nutrient limits, right? And does anybody know, like, so how much storage do you all have for your cake on site?
I mean, we have.
You say a lot. Tell me how many days of storage. If you can haul solids, how many days do your sludge set on site?
I mean, weeks.
2 weeks?
You include our truck days and the wet pack. Yeah, about 2 weeks. We have to.
Do you want to know how many days of storage we need up north? Yeah, 180 days. So we gotta store 180 days of sludge on site because we're frozen for that long. Like, it's cold. So like the stackability and storability of your cake is a really big deal, right? So they stack their sludge. You can see there's this wall and it's like a covered kind of shed. So when they went to have their phosphorus removal limit, at first they did Tempe, and this stuff stacked like crazy. Like this is a 10-foot wall, right? And it's stacked really well. They could store it and not be worried about, because the thing is, like, you have to have 180 days of storage, but our winters can be longer than that sometimes, right? And we really only have the beginning of the growing season and the end of the growing season to apply cake, right? So it's fairly short windows. And a lot of times these plants get pretty close. We're like, man, if it doesn't thaw in the next week, I'm not sure what we're gonna do. So storage is a big deal. When they went to BioP, this is what their cake looked like. They could get it up to 4 feet, and then it was like gelatinous. Yeah, it was like I rewatched the Goonies recently. Everybody see the Goonies? Remember the Truffle Shuffle?
Yeah.
Like, that's what it looks like. It's like the Truffle Shuffle. And so it's just like water bound in it, right? They still are dewatering, they're still adding polymer. So they went where they were at 19% cake with their Kempe. When they started BioP up, they went down to 15% cake, right? And they did a lot of optimization work, and they got it back up to 18%, but it's still lower, right? Now, if you look at the volume of sludge, it's still way less from Kempe, even to this BioP with the lower percent cake. It's still less volume because you're not adding all the chemical, but the storage becomes an issue. Like, you can't stack it as much, so they have to worry about that. There's a couple of other kind of, hey, this is what happens. RBC, everybody know what RBC is? Rotating biological contactor. You still have some? I was in Asheville, North Carolina, a couple months ago, and they run a 30 MGD RBC plant. They have the largest RBC plant in the country, so they're still keeping on. Activated sludge Chem P 18%, activated sludge BioP 14% cake. Right? Oh man, that happened again. Marquette, Michigan, kind of same story. BioP 3 percentage points less than they were for Chem P. So it's like this. Yeah, I just throw these up there quick to say this happens, right? It's something we should be planning for. You know, if you're either a BioP plant that adds digestion or a digestion plant that adds BioP, you're gonna have less cake. You're gonna have a lower percent solids cake. Or there's Clean Water Services again up in Oregon. They were able to maintain their cake. So this blue bar is their cake as they put on BioP, and they maintain that upper 20s. This red bar is their polymer, right? So polymer went from just under 30 to like 52 pounds per dry ton. Yeah, crazy, right? And they've gotten it down. I mean, this is pretty old data already, but they've optimized, they figured it out. But it's like, oh, maybe you can get your cake, but it comes at a polymer cost, right? So why does this happen at facilities that have anaerobic digestion and BioP? Like what's the cause of it, and then how do we manage it? Right? So once we know the cause, we can come up with mitigation strategies. Yeah.
So this plant, and maybe I'm thinking something totally different. They're using a lot of polymer, getting worse results. So do a jar test to make sure you have the correct polymer.
You're exactly right, Crystal. So they're more in like this. They're still higher than they had historically been, but they're in like the mid 30s today, which is still higher. And then their cake is more like in the mid 20s. So there is optimization, but it still takes more polymer, right? It still causes like water to be harder to squeeze out of your sludge when you have BioP and anaerobic digestion. Yeah, it's just squishier, right? Like it's just a very different characteristic. So why is that? Like, why do we see it? So the first thing is, anybody looked at the ingredients list on like a package of summer sausage? Yeah. I know. Yeah. Phosphate is a water binding agent. Right, phosphate gets added to food products to keep the moisture stuck in the food product. It's just how the ions kind of align, they stick to water, and they keep the water from evaporating. They keep the water bound in the material, right? So adding phosphate to a solid material limits the amount of water. It makes it harder for the water to escape. So what happens with BioP and anaerobic digestion to the phosphorus content in the sludge? What happens if you have biological phosphorus removal and then anaerobic digestion? What kind of phosphate concentrations do we see in the sludge? Really high, right? Because the PAOs, like, they stored all that carbon and then they release the phosphorus, right? So like a non-BioP plant in an anaerobic digester, I mean, there's some phosphorus release, and you'll see 20, 30 milligrams per liter of phosphorus show up in their digested sludge still. Like, it's not zero, but there's some. In a BioP plant, you're at 300, right? So 10 times the amount of water binding agent in your sludge when you combine BioP with anaerobic digestion, right? So then we've released it, and we've just added this water binding agent. So that's one reason that we have poor dewaterability. So how would we fix that? How could you remedy that as an operator? If that soluble phosphorus is the reason that it's difficult to dewater, what comes to mind to try to improve your dewaterability? Yeah, how would you do that? And you don't have to take the phosphorus out. You just have to make it particulate instead of soluble. Yeah. Do you think the PAOs are still alive after they go through the anaerobic digester? No. So just aerating's not going to do it.
I do have a question. Because we got to sit for 2.5 hours. And that's just what they told me when I'm over there. I do dewatering.
Yep.
2.5 hours, let's just get it up 4 feet. But are we letting it sit too long? Do we need to do, instead of, let it fill the tank up, maybe we could have it and do an hour and a half. So we don't have such a high phosphorus release, because I've done phosphorus tests on the citrate.
Yeah.
Coming out there, and it's freaking hot.
Yeah, it's going to release. Like, why wouldn't they, right? And it's all about managing that. So I can tell you, like, in whatever 2.5 years, when you have new facilities at decrews, like, you won't be decanting anymore. Like, there'll be the facilities in place where you don't have to do that anymore. Is that fair to say, John? Like, but right now, yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right? I mean, if you don't have the capacity to dewater that thinner sludge, I mean, you got to decant to get it thicker. Otherwise, because like you're limited by centrifuges right now too, right? So it's not like if you didn't thicken it first, could you keep up with all that volume? And so now it's just like, well, you're recycling that phosphorus. You just have to be cognizant of that recycle stream, and you might have enough VFA on the influent to deal with it, which I think you do. But sometimes you might see blips as well, and that's where alum has to get added. Like eventually, there's got to be some binding of that phosphorus. So I would say you should limit the amount at any BioP plant, right? Try to limit the amount of anaerobic time your sludge has before you have a way to bind up that phosphorus.